Hello there. Thank you for joining in today for AIVA Innovate with Authenticity. My name is Eva Tyson, your host. I am so excited to present you with Dr. Tammy Hollis. She is a great human being. She's very compassionate, but she's also an expert in cybersecurity. As you know, now we're going through digital transformation and cybersecurity is a big part of it. When I was in one of the major digital transformation, I was doing the training, the coaching, and the consulting. But the part that got me the most is when I see people from the organizations I was training. As organizations, it's so important to think about the strategy and communicate with everyone involved, especially a time when we're facing a very fast pace of adoption. About what Dr. Hollis and I was talking about, people come first, especially in cybersecurity, faced with a lot of burnout and people don't really have the time even spend on training. So I can explain and unpack a little bit later, but this is why it's so important to have a coach come in early in your digital transformation and co-create, look at what is current state and really help your companies to have the right strategy before you are going into a digital transformation. There's so many organizations that I help with transformation. That's where we are. Welcome to the world where technology is racing ahead, right? But really, artificial intelligence isn't just a buzzword anymore. By the end of last year and this year, you can see that it's really reshaping how we do business now. But here's the question too. Your organization, how do you know your organization is ready to take this change? So that's also a topic that we're talking today. Do you know that 55% of the organization plan to deploy AI and 20% organizations actually have some sort of AI deployment already or have not have any plan on adopting AI in the next 12 months. But if you really think about it, organizations are rushing to deploying AI. It's really about adopting, how fast they can adopt to bring technology in the cloud. So let's pause a moment here and ask, is a business really ready to take this leap, and is it even the right thing to go for AIs? And it's really truly, if you don't take digital transformation, if you don't go with AI adoption or making it faster in your cloud, is it going to be an issue? And yes and no. So it's true that if you really think about the data saying 94% of executives and 92% of IT professionals really believe that companies will fall behind without AI investment. And I am pro AI and I agree with it, but here's also the thing to consider. So there are teams, AI skills and where they are at. So there's a disconnection between the ambition and the reality, especially when you think about how fast AI is moving now. The faster AI's adoption rate, it's, from my experience, it's more vulnerabilities happening in the cybersecurity space. But yet, if you really think about the data in cybersecurity, it's a whole culture change, not just technology, and people get burned out. So when do people find the time to even upskill themselves? So if organizations are really about adopting AI as fast as possible without having the right strategy, it might be not as fruitful. So this is why having a business coach is important, because strategy first, then AI after. Yeah, very much into AI, adopting the latest AI tool, but also understanding the core narrative. What is the vision narrative? How do we translate into outcomes that serve our customers, that serve your employees? And on top of that, what are your business unique value propositions and how you can align that technology to amplify that vision narrative. As I mentioned, there's 20% of organizations have already deployed AI, so that's a significant portion going right now. So some organizations thinking upskilling isn't a nice to have anymore, it's a necessary. In the end, if you really think about it, even with the fast pace of AI technology, what's the most important is still the people, because the people are the one who can think creatively and can bring out the solution. People, then AI cannot work as effectively. On the other hand, if you don't really give your people enough time to learn, a lot of people, from my experience in digital transformation, people just keep saying, I'm so busy, I can't come to the training, I can't upskill myself. So another part is some organizations going through change and people are worried about what's going on with my job, where am I heading? So that fear, that worries, that get really into the productivity, the mindset, the space where people can really focus on learning and be creative, but rather people are facing with fear, with uncertainty, and even some of them may recognize that it's important to upskill themselves. They may not have even the appropriate time or even know where to start. So once again, this is where a business coach can come in and help your organization to assess what are your true north and how do you translate into outcomes that benefit your customers. And are you a part of that 41% focusing on skill and digital training, or are you getting caught just at what the technology can do without a solid foundation? So remember, a business coach isn't just a guy. There are strategists that help you to gain your narrative in technological advancement, and I'd love to be that person to help you. So consider this. Are you ready to not just survive, but thrive in this AI, cybersecurity driven era? Or if you need clarity, direction, and strategy that intertwines with your business story and with technology growth, please reach out to me. I'm on LinkedIn and I have my information on my website too. So let's craft our unique path with this digital transformation journey. And with that, please enjoy our conversation between me and Dr. Hollis. Thank you for listening to AIVA Innovate with Authenticity, and see you very soon.
How are you, Tammy? How are you?
I'm very well. How are you?
I am so excited to have you on the call today. Thank you so much for just jumping right in, and Happy New Year to you, Tammy.
Glad to be here. Happy New Year to you as well.
Yes, thank you. So welcome to AIVA Innovate with Authenticity. My name is Ava Tech, and I'm the host for the show. And I'm so excited to introduce Dr. Tammy Hollis today. I know Tammy's way back then. Tammy, you've been there for me so many times when I was having my international client at the International Venture Fund, and you're there, you're offering me time. I can't believe how wonderful it is to be, the only one who's going into the organization and having another female leader who is there and really I can really touch base with. It's tremendously helpful. So it's such a treat to have you here. So let me just kind of just tell everyone about you a little bit. So for those you don't know, Tammy is an international leader. She's worked in digital transformation, and she worked with leaders and executives, and she's passionate about cybersecurity. And recently, Tammy just finished her doctorate in cybersecurity. And as a female leader who also work in the IT field, I resonate a lot with the things you do because I'm also doing my doctorate myself. So we have a lot of things in common. And the conversation today, it's just really about how do we bring our knowledge, our experience in cybersecurity, in IT to help leaders, to help executives, especially, other women in in the role where you have to make decisions. And let's just have a conversation about how do we innovate with authenticity. What do you say, Tammy?
I think what came to mind as I was listening to you just then is a great piece of advice that was given to me was trust yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Right, because you've got the background, you've got the experience, you've had to learn on the fly, you've got experience across multiple industries, and trust yourself. You're where you're at for a reason,
Yeah.
and you've got the opportunity to make those decisions and really help people for a reason. So I think trusting yourself is a really big one right off the bat.
Trusting yourself. Absolutely. So tell me about a time, Tammy, where you feel like you're in a challenging um, situation and you have to trust yourself. You have to make that decision. Um, yeah. Share more about that.
You know, for me, sometimes it's about gut or what feels like a gut feeling and going with it. And what also is here is connecting the dots, right? There's many times I've learned that I see dots, others don't, and I see how to connect them. And having the courage or the belief to make the decision that needs to be made, and then able to explain what I was seeing or how things will fall into place next because of those. And I've had people say, oh, I didn't think about it like that. Oh, I didn't realize that was over there. Oh, you're right, in 2 months. Right. And so being able to see the bigger picture, and again, trusting what you're seeing and not second guessing yourself or being talked out of it. And at the same time, it's also not digging in your heels when you've got new information, right? So you also have to be able to take in things as they're happening to make the best decision.
Yeah. So give me an example where you potentially have to even walk yourself through that process, knowing that you've got it in you, but then, even have to walk through like, hey, I gotta have to trust myself in this time. And even in client settings, how do you help the clients to do that? Just being you and go through those processes.
Right. So that's a great question. And that's also the answer. I try to ask the best questions I can because if I'm seeing things they're not, I help them try to see them. And so many times it helps organizations come to the answer themselves. So let's say that there is a technical scenario. They want to go down a road that everybody isn't bought into. And whether I see a different road that they've been discussing, or maybe a road they haven't even thought of, I will ask questions about what if we tried this? Do you remember when we did X 2 years ago? Or have you ever? Right. And sometimes that leads them right where I was thinking. But more often than not, it leads them to go, oh, yeah, it's not really like that thing 2 years ago, but what if we did this? Right. So it's just helping them think through the situation, maybe more broadly at first. And so now all of a sudden I'm thinking about design thinking and the divergence and the convergence, right?
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned so many things that I love, that diversion and conversion, and a lot of time we're starting out with diversions and having people to think through, and what you mentioned, it sounds like you are partnering with them and allowing that space for the clients to think. And even if it doesn't um, come to the right solution right away, it's okay because then they have the time to process and they have thought about, well, maybe it's not really relevant, but it can still help them to connect the dots, like you say. So go ahead. You have something to say?
I was going to say that's right. I really believe in the partnership of it. I don't think that it's even when I'm hired as a consultant, it may not always be my place to hand out answers, right? Because that's it. There's how many times have we been at either had a consultant in our organization or been the consultant in a client organization, and there's a miscommunication or somebody really doesn't understand the problem. And how many times has something great happened, the consultant leaves and or everything leaves with them. And so I think it's so important to partner with the organization so they're learning, so they're growing, so that they have that knowledge.
Absolutely. I mean, I wholeheartedly believe in partnerships as well. You know, as we're going into a new organizations, we're a consultant, but before we can consult, we need to partner to understand how our clients things, what are the pain point, because each organization would have that individual pain points, that individual DNA that might not even applicable from other places. Yes, we can bring our experience, but I'm always thinking partnership really allowed each of us to bring in that mindsets, that, you know, like beginner mindsets. And yes, go ahead.
No, I agree with you on that, because sometimes what happens too, you get hired to do X. And when you get there and you start to get the feel of the organization, or you get more information that are hard facts, right? You have to take that in and adjust, because maybe the problem they thought they were trying to solve isn't actually the problem, or maybe there's a broader one, or maybe it's actually smaller, right? And so just really, I hear this saying, and it's not necessarily what I'm a fan of. It's meet the client where they're at, but boy, there's a lot to that. Otherwise, you run the risk of selling them something they don't need, or solving a problem that isn't what they need, and that's wasteful for everybody.
Tell me a little bit about what you say when you mention there's a lot to it. Share more.
I don't remember the context I said it in.
Sure. So let's come back to it a little bit later. But you know, you're also an authority in cybersecurity, and like, tell me how all of that started. You know, cybersecurity definitely is a big topic in, like, besides AI, right? Like, it's definitely a big topic in digital transformation. What brought you to cybersecurity and end up doing your PhD in it?
Yeah,
What's
I'd love to
passion
talk
driving?
about that.
Yeah.
I was working on digital projects, different back office systems, business systems, those kind of things. And I actually had a VP of cybersecurity come to me and ask me to join their team of a pretty new cybersecurity team. And so I got to grow with them. And so I got to be part of every element that I would consider part of a cyber program, but at the management layer. So I was at the director level and had a pretty technical background. I started out learning technology in the Navy. And so just from then on, I've always found myself in that space. And when I was invited to that team, what I really, really fell in love with, these are the people that do things behind the scenes that nobody realizes the work they're doing. And, I had peers that were out working on the fun, sexy, visible applications that the customers were seeing. And here we were doing all the things in the background to protect those things, right? To make sure they were secure. And so I really enjoyed that about it, being able to make a difference and work with the team making a difference on the backside of things.
Yeah. I mean, it made me think of the time when I was working with a cybersecurity teams too, from the leaders, and you know, when we were trying to flesh out you know, the objective and key results, and we're even thinking about like who are the audience, who are the customers. And to your point, these are the hero. You didn't say that word, but these are the heroes working behind the scene. No one know what they're doing, but like a lot of time things happen like in a split of the second, and we have to think about even also anticipate what might even be happening. And sometimes there isn't a specific external customer per se, but I often tell teams like, yes, but we're working for a company, and we're protecting the company, and we're protecting even the clients of the company at large. So you're like the hero in so many levels behind the scene, and you have this compassion that trying to help those folks. So share with me some of the experience where it was challenging in a project, but then you help them to go through with it, to innovate, to think differently, and really get together and get through that, potential threat or whatever that cybersecurity threat is.
Right. Well, the people that work on these kind of things, you're right. I didn't use the word hero, but you did. And that is really how I see them, because large companies are able to have incident response teams. But if you're not a giant company, you likely don't have full teams, and people often have other responsibilities. And so watching people try to navigate their day-to-day job, the other things that don't rise to the level of an incident that are happening, and then when the actual incident, the emergency does happen, they are stretched. I think about surge capacity. That concept became popular during COVID, and it really is something that happens when there is an incident. And that is just really where my passion went, was recognizing what was happening for them, what was being given by them, and what was being taken from them. And so when you start seeing people, and it's almost like it's intrinsic into their personality of, we've got to find what this is in our network, right? And I've got to do everything I can to recover our systems. And you see people not eating, not sleeping, missing birthday parties, all of that kind of thing. That's what made me want to research what happens to people, and what some of the causes are, and what some of the outcomes are. And I'll say impacts rather than causes, because I didn't necessarily determine causality. But what I found is, and most of the people that I talked with for my research, they had a similar experience at their organization. And so that really gave a lot of insight into, I believe these people are first responders.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah, like they're almost like fighter, like, or even policemen, where things are like getting hectic or things are getting dangerous. They are there to really even forgo some of their personal
that's right.
events, and really there to help. So what is your thesis? Share with us a little more about your thesis, and what one of the insight that you learned from it.
Right. So I went into it with 3 different questions.
Mm-hmm.
What the impacts were, how it impacted them, and then I did a comparison to traditional first responders. And so pretty broad, even though it was all asked of the same 22 subjects. But I think one of the surprising things that came out of it, and that's kind of the beauty of research, right? You ask these questions and you don't know what you're going to come up with. That's the reality of research. It is an experiment. And while I did qualitative work rather than quantitative, I still did not know the outcomes. And part of what's really interesting, part of what I loved about the research is the rigor, right? I could have given an opinion without getting a doctorate, but I wanted to add the rigor to really understand it more and to be able to talk about it. And so in doing that, one of the concepts that came out in the literature review was the concept of emotional labor.
Mm.
And this is additional work people do in the workplace, and we don't talk about it and we don't think about it. But it takes cognitive resources, right? So you've got these people facing an emergency and they're at a heightened emotional state, and that takes energy. And so they work to bring themselves to a place where they can focus on resolving a problem they don't know the answer to. And they take steps to solve that problem that may or may not work. And whether it works or not, it moves them closer to the answer. So they iterate on that. So those were two pieces of invisible work that came out: the emotional labor of either regulating their own emotions, or if they were leaders, or if they were external vendors that were hired, they were managing their own emotions and the emotions of others. So that's the additional energy draw and cognitive draw. The other piece is improvisation, right? They have to have some situational awareness. They have to have some intrinsic knowledge. And then they have to take in what's happening in that moment and make a decision. And so we talked earlier about decision making, right? And so we think we have a process for that, but improvisation takes it a step further. You have to act.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Right. And I found that really fascinating and really interested in some future work there, because a lot of the academic work around improvisation is about teams or the organization rather than the individual. So I'm really curious about looking into that in the future.
Very interesting. You mentioned so many things that relevant to our modern work in digital transformations. Like things are getting more and more complex. I have leaders come to me and say, Ava, what I'm really great at is solving problems, but this problem is like beyond me now. And what do I do? And come back to your conversations, like we talk about design thinking, diversion, and conversion, and often tell leaders, look, what about asking questions rather than solving it? What about helping your teams empower them to solve the problems? And you don't have to have all the answers, but leverage your team, leverage your talents. And to your point, nowadays it's not like 1 + 1 = 2 anymore. It's like complex environment. A lot of time we have to act, we have to improvise. And also in the mix, in the heightened situations, we have to regulate our own emotions and also regulate other people emotions. So share with me some of the wins that you've seen happening in that cybersecurity space where you help other people to regulate emotions. You probably have to regulate your emotion yourself. And what do you feel about it?
That's interesting. So I think that there's a caveat to this answer. So this research is really new. It's less than a month since my dissertation was published. So I look forward to the future work that I'm going to get to do. But there was a scenario that came to mind. I told you I have my own experience with this. And we were probably 10 days into a months-long response. And I happened to walk in an office where an executive and a director were discussing the next steps, and I turned to walk out, and I was asked to stay. Listen to what they talked about, and the sentence ended, or the conversation ended with, "And I need to know the plan you have for tonight."
Mm.
And I look at the director and he looks at me, and his face looked like the spinning circle on a Windows computer. I could tell he was exhausted. I could tell there wasn't a full thought process there. So I look at the other gentleman and I said, "May I?" And they handed me one of the markers. And so it was in that moment that I started asking questions and making suggestions. And when we left that room, I went to get people some access to an environment they were going to need access to, following our normal processes. Those two went home. I ask them to go home because they've been working on it for so many days.
Mm,
And that is what happens to so many of these first responders. And that's really why I am such an advocate for the human in this.
mm-hmm,
The individual worker, I think I said it earlier in an earlier conversation, if you strip away the network and you strip away the computer, you have humans left that are the bad actor and the good guy trying to get their system back. And so it's so important to take care of them. Because when you think if they're using most of their cognitive capacity to do their day job, and then this happens, and a week or 10 days later, they have so little left. It is so important we take care of them because it's a risk to them. They're not in a good place. You know, their well-being isn't ideal. So we've got to pay attention to the risk to the human, but
mm-hmm,
we also, it is a risk to the organization. What would that person have missed at the 10th day? What are they going to miss at the 20th day? Are our responses going to be prolonged? And, you know, IBM does a report every year and it says for major incidents, the average, one of the average times is over 200 days. It's right around 3/4 of a year. So you think about these people working day in and day out. I think we have to take care of them so that they don't get burned out. That's such a big problem, the stress and burnout in the cyber industry. Not industry, it's not its own industry, but for the people doing the work in that domain in every industry. And so I think we really, really have to take care of them. And there are some great organizations doing some work, but I believe we can be proactive,
mm-hmm.
right?
Yes.
And not just treat the stress and burnout on the backside of things as well.
Yes. So, Tammy, we're here talking about cybersecurity, IT, and protecting organizations. And you brought up some very important point, which is the people in it, right? Like whatever we want to do, it might sound counterintuitive, but it's really about protecting the people first and foremost, because otherwise it's not just common sense, but it also smart decisions, because otherwise it's the risk for the organizations. So what advice do you have for organizations, for leaders, executives, as they are trying to protect their companies of threats and their clients of threat, but also there's also people involved?
I think there's a wide range of opportunity, really, when it comes to executives. So many of the stories that I heard, people talked about executives making demands on them while the incident was going on. And so it may have been incident related or it may not have been. So if I can help educate executives on this, these are the type of things that happen when there's a major incident, when you really want all hands on deck or half the hands on deck so they can rotate out, which would be another one of my pieces of advice. But help them understand what's happening and what can and should wait till later. Because I think part of what happens right now is I don't think it's from a place of malintent. I think they just don't know what it's like when there's the realization of an incident.
Yeah. And you mentioned something important here, Tammy, because, a lot of time when we're going through a digital transformation, it's a lot to do with education, right? Like there's so many there's so many trips where I make to the corporate headquarters, and the first thing we do, or I do, is to go for dinner with them and to get to know them in the personal level, but also to really educate them and getting to know to know leaders, and having that empathy and compassion to them too, because a lot of time the problem is complex, they don't know, and before we make decision, it's important to have that broader view, they have that education, so they can really make a better informed decision for their organizations.
I think executives suffer from the same thing in a certain sense, right? I had somebody last month say to me, well, if you're an executive, you're expected to be on 24/7.
Mm.
And I was like, gosh, I hope that's not the case. right? I hope they're sleeping at some point. I hope they're doing something athletic at some point, moving around, trying to
Yeah.
take care of themselves on some level. Because if I want to sit here and talk about how cyber professionals are constantly taking care of their day job, and then whatever possible incident might come in, and then one of these big one comes in, they're exhausted from constantly using their brain. Executives are in those shoes also. So if we can educate them and give them peace of mind about, this team really knows what they're doing, but you really have to take care of them. You really have to respect them. And these are the things you don't ask for while this is going on. And it broadens across the organization, because in so many instances, when an incident happens, there's kind of a need to know piece to it. And that they're working in this clandestine environment. People may not even realize there's an incident when people start working on it, and may not for, it depends how long, right? And so if Bob in accounting or Susie in marketing are coming wanting new servers spun up, or wanting you to look at a new piece of software, or whatever the case may be, depending on your role in the organization, they are distractions as well, and there's no way for them to know any better. And that's why I think another element is having a culture of cybersecurity, right? I was fortunate enough to talk to a couple of people that their incident did not have the same effects on their team because of how mature they were and how solid their processes were. And in both instances, there were two of them, in both instances, their culture was so familiar with cybersecurity that they knew, like, there was something they could say to the organization, and then people just knew, all bets were off, we're not going to bug that team, right? And so that was fabulous. And so, man, that would be a dream state for so many organizations to be that well
Yes.
done.
So you mentioned a lot of things there. Like one of the things I pick out was that just because you're executives, you're also human, and you also have to take care of yourself. And even more importantly, to take care of yourself and also delegate. And you didn't mention that word, but let the team do what the team do best. So that way everyone can have that sanity and make even better, uh, you know, make better, how do I say it, decisions, right? But another thing you mentioned about have a culture for cybersecurity. Share with me more. What do you mean by that?
I think that it is one of the things that happens so often is cybersecurity awareness, and people have to do these quizzes on computers, or when they get onboarded in once a year, and that's kind of the end of it. Or they hear something read something in a newsletter, or hear something during a town hall. But I think that the more transparent that we are about the day-to-day cybersecurity pieces, I'm not talking about when an incident happens, but in the day-to-day pieces, the better. I know when I was looking at the academic literature for my dissertation, there's a field called cyber and so much of it is focused on the rest of the organization and not the professionals. And so the people in the rest of the organization get fatigued by cybersecurity too, by the extra steps they have to go through, or the multi-factor authentication, right? There's something extra to compare to what there was in prior years. And I think we have to be mindful of that. But I also think that we have to talk about our processes. And so if we believe we have an incident, or we declare an incident, that there's language or processes in place so people know, all right, Jill was supposed to be at this project meeting. I bet she's not going to make it today. And that's okay. Right. And so I think it gives the opportunity to have more respect and more grace.
Yes, more grace and more respect. And it made me definitely think about how digital transformations, even helping through cybersecurity lens, it's so important to think about it's like a marathon, not like a sprint, like, and having that communications and having that compassion to other people, also it's important. And making sure everyone's informed so that everyone can really think about what is like, how do you respond, like that improvisations, like you mentioned at the very beginning, right? So this is like a really interesting conversation. What else? One of the things you wanted to, to everyone to take away with, absolutely, after listening to our conversation today.
I think that it is important to realize that it's a highly specialized field, and that when people are required to respond to an incident, they don't know what's on the other side of that screen. It's not as simple as, oh, this is like the one we had last month, but today it's blue. So I'll do this instead. It is not like that at all. And it is likely very complex. I was listening to a story yesterday talking about all the obfuscation in the code of some malware that was part of ransomware. And when you think about all the things that are trying to be unraveled and at the same time just trying to secure your network so no more damage can be done. I think that understanding that the professionals working that incident and working in cybersecurity every day are being asked to do a lot of things that if they were clearer, if they were fresher, if they were rested, um, they would do even better at their jobs. And it is the one, can you go out and buy another tool? Yes. Can you go out and get another cybersecurity professional? Absolutely. But what that person knows about your environment is priceless. And so a lot of time there's turnover or believed to be turnover. I've actually found that, yes, there is some, but in other cases, it's more of a fear than a reality. Having that person stay, what they've learned during that incident will pay for itself time and time again. And so I think the message really is take care of your people, staff correctly, be mindful, pay attention to what's important, the busy work, and there is plenty of busy work. And this is something that just popped in my head that I know you can relate to. When you are helping an organization implement something new, how many times are people trying to condense timelines?
Mm-hmm.
They should be condensed. But one of the things, especially with cybersecurity tools, is the final configuration and the tuning that needs to happen after the implementation or at the conclusion as you're wrapping it up. Because when those things are done well, it makes the cyber person's job them able to focus on the thing that they need to, and it better protects your organization.
Absolutely. There's so many important nuggets there. And I definitely can relate because we can't push innovations. We can't push um, doing things correctly, and we can't push creating the right product and creating the right environment. And a lot of time it based on the people in it, like the people who have that knowledge, who were the first responders. And whatever the tools, like you mentioned, every organization go through digital transformation. The bigger change, the easier, or like the more people prone to burnout and turnover. And if you look at Gallup's, right, like they have done that survey, and like I think yearly it's about $500 billion. So eventually you may have to replace that person. It's like more expensive. So creating innovation is also about leveraging the talents within the organizations and really trust them to do their work, and let them having that rest, having that balance so that they can make better decisions. Any
Yeah,
last word? Go ahead.
Say, I really think I want to beat that drum that people are the differentiator. You hired them for a reason. They bring expertise, all kinds of expertise. We talked about that before and didn't really talk about it here as much, but we bring expertise from everything we've touched, right? And so do those technical people, so do those cybersecurity people. Take care of them and let them shine. You'll love what they do for your organization.
Take care of them and let them shine, and they will do their best to protect your organizations. These are fantastic words, Tammy. So thank you so much for the time today. If people wanted to reach out to you, how would they do that?
They can find me on LinkedIn, Dr. Tammy Hollis, Tammy with an IE. And I'd be happy to hear from anybody in my DMs or connect with them. I'm going to be posting about my research a good part of this year and would love to hear from anybody who's so inclined.
Fantastic, Tammy. Reach out to Tammy, and thank you so much for this amazing conversation. It's so relevant to our world in tech today. It touched on all of these components of how important the people are in your organizations, their talents, protect them, especially when we go through a lot of changes in the digital space. So thanks again, Tammy, and thank you for listening to IAVA Innovate with Authenticity, and see you next time.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure to be here.
Thank you.